Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Laura Greeley, Regional VP of IAB Southeast Asia and India, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Revolve webinar series. This week, we deep dive into OTT across the region. Lockdown and various forms of movement control has led to a 60% surge of video streaming in our region, which opens new opportunities for brands to connect with their audience. Today, Gavin Buxton, Managing Director APAC at SpotX, will take us through the unique characteristics of the Southeast Asia OTT market, map out the landscape and identify major global, regional and local players, and as well as that provide insights into key markets such as Indonesia, the Philippines and Thailand. Of course, we would be remiss not to look at how COVID-19 has impacted some of these consumption levels, and then we look at what trends are happening throughout the region. Following on from that, he will be joined by Crisela Cervantes from Mindshare Indonesia to discuss her experience within this space. This is an interactive session. Please do feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at the side of your screens. Without further ado, I'll hand you over to Gavin.
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be given the opportunity today to speak on the explosive growth of OTT in Southeast Asia, and happy and delighted to have Crisela join us to have a discussion with me in getting into the deeper side of brands and agencies' view of the growth of OTT and the opportunities it creates. With regards to myself, I'm leading up SpotX within the region. Reference to our passion in this area, we're a video ad tech company providing tech and services to enable media owners to connect with brands through ad serving and programmatic. In diving into the session today, there's a few key areas we're going to cover off. Intro to OTT to kind of set the scene, the landscape across Southeast Asia, what's taking place, specifically COVID impacts and what's taking place, the opportunity for brands and the future of OTT, what's coming, and then we'll dive into our discussion. As said, there is Q&A options in there. I'll keep track of it or answer as we go, or look to do so at the end as part of our Q&A. With regards to what OTT is, essentially it's an over-top streaming video refers to content streaming over the internet to a connected device like a smartphone, tablet, laptop, or CTV. So essentially what's outside your traditional broadcast feed and is being delivered digitally to you. This can be a big screen for CTV in your lounge, or it can be OTT, especially in Asia, from a mobile app perspective. An additional area that's looked at is actually the premiumness of the inventory that's coming through, content premium, and we'll touch on that as we go. With this growing space, there's a number of different business models that platforms are operating in. The one that's kind of most significant in the region, and we'll dive into why as we go, is looking at ad-supported video on demand, or AVOD. This essentially is content that's freemium in that ads are delivered to you, but in exchange for the content that you're viewing. So more familiar with free-to-air from a traditional perspective. The other side of that is on a subscription model, so actual monthly fee. In Asia, there's additional models on top of this in terms of transactional, where people could get a day's access, a week's access, or specifically against the show. And more common than not, and even in the US and in Asia, is a hybrid model where there's a certain amount of freemium, but then there could be an additional element of payment for additional services or content that you can consume within that environment. In diving into the landscape within Southeast Asia, this is a snapshot of a number of the OTT providers within the region. We've broken it down into global, regional, and local. You'll see from a global perspective, very heavily dominated by US global companies, global broadcasters such as Warner with HBO, Disney Plus, Fox with Tubi, and then obviously your tech companies with Amazon Prime, Apple, taking leading positions and soon to launch in a number of markets in the region. Disney Plus as well, with Netflix being kind of the stable that's been consistent in the growth of OTT. They're going to continue to penetrate the market with their launches, so it's going to be interesting to see how they evolve. The next layer is from a regional perspective. So these are dominated by significantly telcos, tech companies, or digital-first OTT platforms. View is a significant player owned by the PCCW group out of Hong Kong. They've got strong presence across the whole region. There is, even on a global level and into a regional level, there's a lot of consolidation that's taking place. So we've seen that on a global level within the region. We've seen recently Tencent WeTV has acquired iFlix, and they're operating as two separate entities and platforms for now. And then we see within the regional perspective, there's a lot of Chinese companies that are coming into it. So iQIYI is another one that has global ambitions. And from India, the likes of Yuck TV, Z5 and Hotstar is related to Disney, are making a strong presence known and have kind of bigger ambitions. Where it really gets interesting is on the local level. So here we're looking at a lot of the traditional broadcasters, whether that's video, ABS, CBN, I Want, obviously MediaCorp's Me Watch, Channel 3 from Thailand. All of these are adapting to consumer behavior changes. And we also see a lot of the telcos come into play here with the likes of Maxstream, First Media, with Indonesia, in terms of AIS in Thailand, Signal Play in Philippines, with access to consumers, especially on a mobile perspective. Building out a content strategy has been something that's been taking place. And additionally, the digital first, whether that started from transportation, from a GoPlay perspective, or whether that's from communication, from a line TV perspective, video is definitely hotting up, and there's a lot of people coming into this space. It is, a pretty competitive space. I mean, one to call out was Singtel's Hook, that was operating a service across the region, but dissolved at the beginning of this year, unfortunately. iFlix again being taken over. So definitely a competitive space. Why is this taking place? Well, predominantly through consumer behavior change. So consumers, through the access to digital handsets, video screens, are consuming what they want to watch when they want to watch. And the data here from Global Web Index is essentially showing the increase in online streaming hours and minutes across the region between 2014 and 2018. So it's even accelerated beyond this relative to this data, and see the likes of Thailand, India, Vietnam kind of really increasing at the same time when it comes to linear TV viewing. This has decreased. One clarification point here is this is actually the delivery of linear TV in the old format. Actual digital linear is coming into these OTT platforms, but in terms of the traditional linear TV delivery, we've seen this drop. Another reason for this rise from a perspective of time spent is that when it comes to Asia, and this definitely differentiates from the US, is that we're seeing that there's a vast increase in the amount of video-enabled screens. So on this chart here across Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, looking year on year from 2018 to 2019, you'll see here the video-enabled screens, TV screens at the bottom there, not necessarily increasing too much, although it's a growth area, and depending on the market, there's higher penetration like Singapore, Korea in terms of smart TVs or IPTV. But mobile is obviously like the key growth area. A few reasons on this. One is obviously device costs are coming down. The big part on this is actually data costs coming down, especially in Asia. It's like an eighth of the price of what it would be, or even less than in the West. So the actual access to smartphones and cheap data is leading people to consume more content within these environments. What does that mean from a kind of local perspective in terms of who's leading within each of the markets that we highlighted? So you'll see here, as mentioned, Netflix is at play. They're certainly stronger in some markets than others, but a lot of the local and regional OTT platforms are able to kind of hold their own within these environments. So one of the elements that we touch on here is really around local content, having relevant content for the consumer within that market, which is harder for the Netflix to do, and leaves the broadcasters and local providers in a better position to be able to build out that content and focus on one market. I mean, some of the ones to call out here, as mentioned, View, iFlix, and now with WeTV is across all of the markets. And then you get into your local telcos like TrueID, or your local broadcasters like Video within Indonesia, but big growth across all of those areas and more players coming into this environment, especially in terms of opening up their inventory to digital and to programmatic. We're seeing that with First Media in Indonesia at the moment, where they were traditionally a linear feed, but now they're looking to open that up and open up ad opportunities, and that's taking place across the board, across the region. In touching in content, this is kind of why that differentiation is taking place on global to local. Here it shows local content to consumption versus international across each of the markets, what viewers' preferences are. And you'll see here local is essentially 60 to 80% of the actual content that's being consumed. From a perspective of how is this being paid for or how people are expecting it to be paid for, this is a study that was done by Brightcove, sponsored by SpotX last year. And this looks at how people are willing to pay for their content. And free-to-air has been a leading part of what's been taking place in Asia, and that's not really changing when it comes to OTT. It's only 12% on average for people that are prepared to pay a fee for having no ad content. So although a number of us may be familiar with Netflix and used to paying something, seeing no ads, when it comes to the broader realm within Asia, it's really only 12% of people that are willing to do that. The rest are looking to have free content and they're open to ads, have the flexibility of whether they pay or not, or paying a certain fee in terms of reducing ads. Even in the US, when you look at a lot of the OTT platforms, we're given the choice on ad light, which is like the likes of Hulu. 70% of people are actually choosing to have ad light so they can buy into multiple OTTs rather than being restricted to one. So AVOD is a big part of the business model in Asia. So in looking in more recent times, obviously COVID-19 is having a significant impact across a number of areas globally, and we wanted to kind of share what we're seeing with this when it comes to video streaming. So this is diving into Indonesia. This is McKinsey research from this year, and it's looking at facilities that the public are using more of, have started using over this period of time. A few things to call out here: delivery of restaurants and groceries is like the most dominant area. After that, it comes back to online streaming, and then onto online conferences, as we are here today, and online gaming. So people have definitely been embracing the online streaming through COVID-19 as they're obviously in lockdown or stuck at home, not going out, and there's additional time that they're spending. If we look at this from an actual time back to some of the players we mentioned earlier, as mentioned at the beginning, there's between 60 and 80% surge in actual digital viewing over this period of time. And we can see here how that's playing out for a number of the companies in terms of their increase in coverage and usage at this time. Another additional insight that's quite interesting is when it comes to movie launches. Obviously, with movies in shutdown, that kind of removes a whole business, unfortunately. But one example of where a movie has launched online through VOD is Trolls World Tour. So this is a sequel to the first Trolls movie, if you ever saw it. When this first launched in movie theaters, it did 100 million over the course of 5 months. However, in the first 3 weeks of launching purely on OTT, it was able to deliver on 100 million. So obviously a few extenuating circumstances at the moment with kids at homes and families, but definitely shows us potential business models of how this can be looked at differently than it is today, of potential joint launches or a sooner period of time between a launch, but interesting to see. One thing to touch on is, is this just because of COVID that people are, interested in this area, spending more time in this area? As the stats there said, it's kind of bringing some new people into it. But this is stats that we have from 2019 June to this year June. And this looks at there's a continued growth within this area. This is actual ad calls from OTT platforms within the region. And we can see it was a growing area anyway. And the actual trajectory of growth has increased, but not significantly. So we see this as very much a long-term trend and not just necessarily a fad within COVID. It's bringing new people in that are looking to potentially stay within these environments. And going back to that McKinsey research, we're seeing this specifically. The stat here is essentially online streaming. 74% of people have declared that they intend to continue to use it beyond the impacts of COVID. So huge growth and looking to be accelerated but continue to stay. So we're seeing consumers are here. What does this mean for brands? Well, for brands, especially in Asia, where there's a greater mix of mobile app and also some CTV, it creates an exciting and interesting opportunity. One, within these controlled environments, we can look to be brand safe. There's premium user experience in it in terms of the content that's being produced, the premium content, the environment that it's in. It's not a cluttered space. Within mobile app, it's very much measurable for OM SDK. So whether that's across any of the measurement vendors, there's an opportunity for them to be able to third-party verify this. And inherently, as with TV, where we're sitting down to watch something, and you will sit and watch the commercials, within these environments, there's high viewability and high completed view rates automatically within it. And some of these go up to 95, 96%, depending on the platform. Lastly, within this is data enablement. Obviously, it's digitally led. All of what we've learned about digital in terms of the targeting opportunities, whether that's through third-party data, first-party data, behavioral metrics, we can bring into this environment. So it's really taking TV to another level. In kind of touching on a couple of examples within this, we've been partnering with media owners and brands in the region. This is one from the Philippines, and this was Oshi Crispy Patata in the Philippines. And traditionally, they've been spending a lot of their ad dollars within YouTube and within TV, and they wanted to reach out to a broader audience and try new environments. So from an industry perspective, some of the standard metrics that they were seeing and are seeing when it comes to viewability and completed view rates, it's around 62 to 68%. So they set a KPI of 70% in what they were planning to achieve in this area. And that those KPIs were far exceeded with over 90% in viewability and completed view rates. So this was a campaign that ran across all the leading OTT platforms in Philippines at the time, iFlixU, iWant, and Hook, and it had that broad reach and also reaching that audience of 13 to 44 that they wanted to hit. So a successful campaign for them. Another quick example is one of Grab Foods within Indonesia. They were looking to promote a collection of menus with a 50% discount. Again, looking at reach and interactivity. I'll touch a little bit more on interactivity later, but it's within digital. There's kind of some fun interactive things we can do. With this one, they ran across OTT and extended it to premium publishers with the partners listed there. Again, delivering that broad reach in the number of platforms it was on. And for them, again, the viewability was really high compared to the benchmarks of 60 to 70%. They were delivering 80% plus, with OTT being higher, and also with the interactivity they put in place, achieving high click-through rates. So although TV, there's also click-through rates that can happen with in these environments if done within the right targeting. So 9 times the industry average. So that sets the scene on brands. We're going to dive into that obviously more in a little bit. Wanted to touch on some of the future aspects of what's started, what's been seen in other markets, and what we see as scaling over the near term within Asia and over the next 6 to maybe 18 months. The first one is looking at dynamic ad insertion or server-side ad insertion, SSAI. This essentially is being able to deliver digital ads into the content stream. So where before, whether it's a live event and it's kind of the set ads running, or whether it's actual linear delivery of TV where it's one ad to everyone, we can actually, through technology, be able to insert specific ads targeted to individuals either on their household device level or obviously on their individual mobile app level. So this is a sleeping giant really in Asia at the moment. As I mentioned at the beginning, linear in terms of delivery is declining, but in terms of digital linear, even in these OTT platforms, it's an area that a lot of people are still going to. At the moment, those ads are the traditional ads and they're not necessarily being charged for or measured. When we start to replace these ads out with actual digital ads, the scale of the opportunity within OTT is going to increase significantly. So there's a number of broadcasters across the region looking at trialing and activating on this. In the US, it's kind of the standard. But this is something that will be coming and will really scale the opportunity. Secondly, I touched on data before. When it comes to third-party data, this is started to be used within OTT and across digital as a whole. What we're seeing a lot more of in other regions is really the utilization of first-party data. So brands actually collecting and building out their first-party data and bringing it into these environments. And additionally, from the publisher, with sign-in and understanding about these audiences. A lot of broadcasters and even OTT platforms haven't necessarily embraced this side of things at the beginning, but they're really investing in it now to get a better understanding of their audience. One, for the content they deliver, but obviously two, then for the advertising opportunities. So we see a huge growth opportunity within this area. An additional one is around header bidding for OTT. So header bidding essentially is a technology that enables programmatic and direct to compete better together, for programmatic to kind of have a better seat at the table for being considered on activation. And this has been done in the way that we look at it from past, present, future. On a display and online video world, this has been something that's been building out for the last 3 or 4 years and has been operating well. And publishers and media owners have seen the upside against this, which within it allows for better enablement of data. When it comes to OTT, it operates quite differently from display in that it's less open marketplace driven. A lot of these OTT platforms are very cautious on who they open up their inventory to. So 90% of it plus is really driven by private marketplace deals, and best able to activate these is really through header bidding, so that that programmatic ecosystem has a better way to be able to be seen. And for now, that activation of header bidding is starting to take place within OTT. There's a number of providers kind of coming into the space, which is enabling price, actual competition, but also strategic alignment, where there's key clients that a publisher would want to do a deal with. Previously in display, it was purely price-led. When it comes into OTT, there's kind of strategic viewpoints where they might want someone to win with a lower bid price. So that's kind of where we're at today. I think the future is kind of the exciting part of where traditional TV and OTT converge. And this is really enabling through technologies that to work better together. From the US perspective, there's a lot more upfront deals when it's around buying TV inventory. What's happening over there at the moment is actual upfront deals and buying audience within that TV environment. So they're buying mums within a certain channel for the year ahead. So I think we're going to see more of that over the next 6 to 18 months. And with that unified TV and OTT landscape, the technology to make that all work better. Another interesting area is when we look at leveraging content for a creative context. So when it comes into these environments, if we're looking at some of the shows that are being consumed, even if we look at drama, we look at Korean drama within some of these platforms, the general persona of the audience that comes into that is more of an older, savvy female audience. They're a little bit more sophisticated in the storylines. There's a lot more depth to them. So there's additional context behind that content. When you're looking at Thai drama, generally that's appealing to a younger female audience, and the storylines are a little bit more lightweight, a little bit more funny in kind of the approach. So there's more context happening behind that. So beyond just targeting by certain ages, what we can be looking at within OTT is really taking that content, that audience, and bringing some greater context to it, which can influence the actual ads that we deliver into these environments. Rather than one to all, or even one to all, one audience segment. By understanding the audience, we're in a better place to deliver something that's more meaningful. So with that, we have a couple of examples. These are from Wu-Tag. This is looking really at a Bandersnatch kind of delivery. You'll see here with Milo, it's a point of view perspective. You're wandering through the office here. The guy's drinking Milo, but there's certain points in time like here where he's been given the choice of whether to go into the elevator or go down the stairs. And he's actually clicking on the screen then and deciding the route of his video ad journey. So this just takes things to another level on the creativity that can come into these environments. Obviously, this one is a little bit more involved in the shooting and the delivery, but very exciting. Additional ones are taking kind of standard TV ads and applying hotspots to them. So through the course of the actual commercial, you're able to bring hotspots in, and there can be additional messaging, branding, call to actions within these environments. So it's really taking TVCs to another level. So there's some of the areas that we're pretty excited about. With that, I'd love to invite Crisela to join me and give her perspective of obviously the growth in this area and what opportunities it opens up. Crisela,
Hello.
can you?
Hi.
Hello,
Salamat siang from Indonesia. Hi, Gavin.
hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and it's great to obviously have you in Indonesia joining us to give not just a regional view, but from an Indonesia specific view as a leading market in the region. I guess with that, for the sake of the audience, it'd be good for you to give a quick introduction to your role and focus at Mindshare in Indonesia.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Gavin. And happy to be part of this webinar with IAB. It's my first time to be on one of these, so quite exciting. So I lead digital strategy for Mindshare Indonesia, and I oversee a team of digital specialists that cover programmatic, content, search, social, and also audience. So I'm based in Jakarta, and I see you've already covered a lot of stats about Indonesia, so that kind of sets the context in terms of where we are today with online video and OTT.
Thanks for introducing. I guess from your perspective, then, and obviously you're seeing consumer growth there within it. When it comes to premium video and how you look at premium video from a brand's perspective, what do you consider to be premium video, and how much importance do you factor for that when you're considering your media planning?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? So from a consumer standpoint, premium video would have a lot to do with production quality. But from a brand's point of view, it wouldn't just cover that. What's important is to be able to reach the audience, as well as look at brand safety, content that is, fraud-free, that is, again, has reached to the right audience and has high viewability and completion rates.
Okay, thanks. And with that, we touched on kind of local content in what's appealing to consumers within these markets, and we're seeing how the regional and local players are standing out in the fact that they do have locally relevant content. How important is that for brands from that local content side of things, and how do they view how they can utilize that in a different way from potentially international or otherwise?
Right. I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because in your chart you show iFlix and video, and iFlix content. I think they're one of the reasons why it's done so well in this market is just having both locally produced content as well as Korean content. And if you look at the rise of video in the last 4 months, it's also because they started offering a lot more locally produced content and exclusive Korean Sinetron or content that's quite popular with the audience. So it's been one of the ways to grow audience in Indonesia, I would say. But I think it's an important element. But the success of an OTT has to do with really building its ecosystem. The one part is content, because that's how you get the audience. But there are other things that I think make View, Video, and iFlix successful, and that has to do with building more strategic partnerships, right? That grow accessibility, and I think that's what these top players have done in this market to drive more users to use their platforms.
And on that strategic partnerships in terms of partnering with telcos or partnering with
Yep.
brands or
yeah. I mean, it allows us more creativity. I think having local content, which is always a good thing. And I'm glad you mentioned the possibilities with OTT when it comes to creativity, because I think this is often overlooked. Right, we're quite focused in terms of why OTT is important, because you reach the right audience, it's addressable, there's high completion rates, etc. But at the end of the day, you have to land it with the right creative to get your brand message across, right? And the ability to work closely with these partners like Video, iFlix on local content, and having more integrated brand content and brand messages is definitely a big opportunity. I don't think it's been explored as much as it should be, it's a clear opportunity area. And I think that should be one of the focus as well, apart from all the conversations about, tech integration and making sure that all the quality metrics are being met.
Thanks for that. And I mean, we touched there from a Mindshare view. So when it comes to Mindshare and your view of OTT, how do you see the opportunity, and how do you want to get involved, whether that is in terms of content integration, product placements, etc., and how do you see the kind of advertising opportunity from a Mindshare perspective of the growth in this area? How are you looking to embrace it?
Yeah, we're extremely excited about OTT. I think, like you mentioned, 2019, we already had a lot of conversations because we've seen the rise, although the scale wasn't there yet. And we've been monitoring as closely as you have in terms of the impact of COVID on consumer behavior and watch time on OTT. So we spend a lot of time working with the local partners as well and regional partners to develop the supply side, right? Because the demand is there. Brands want to be seen next to premium content for the reasons I already mentioned, which is high viewability, completion rates, brand safe environment. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the integration into programmatic DSPs. And of course, the dream is to make it as seamless as possible, but it's a daily job. And the team works very closely with different SSPs, with DSPs, and the publishers, the OTT players, to make sure that where we have the demand, the supply is there. So it's an ongoing challenge. I think we've had some success already, especially with the local players. So we're very happy with that progress. But there's still a lot to be covered because, as you mentioned, the promise of OTT isn't just in reaching any audience, but the fact that we should be able to identify that audience much better based on their behavior on OTT. And I think that is still not been fully exploited. We haven't even, we just scratched the surface in terms of OTT opportunity in Indonesia. And that's homework that needs to be done, right? How are we leveraging the signals within the OTT to identify who these audience are, right? I don't think we have that full picture yet working with the key OTT partners. And that's fine because it's a journey. And, again, this is something that we work closely with all of the partners. And we're happy to continue evolving the supply ecosystem so we can answer these questions much better for brands.
Thanks for that. And I mean, I'm just reading through the questions as well. There's a lot of questions coming up. You kind of touched on it there, so a little bit, but what do you think is holding back advertisers from embracing OTT media more fully? What are the challenges? I mean, you touched there on, helping, the partners best understand what brands are looking for.
Yep.
You touched on behavior signals. Anything else you'd kind of throw in of what's holding back?
Yeah, I think so. So one part is educating the publishers in terms of what's important to brands and kind of letting them play on their strengths, right? Which is premium quality, which means higher completion rates, etc. On the other hand, it's also educating brands, right? And how to look at video, and not all video should be seen in the same way. So, it's you have to put some structure and framework to it to understand how to compare different video formats, right? And how we can actually help them plan better to understand the role of each video format and the whole consumer journey. So there's a lot of education that also happens on the client side. Obviously, there are some clients that are far more advanced and would appreciate the difference in a premium video environment versus a non-premium video environment. But I think more and more, with the development of the local supply and our work with the different publishers and partners and that whole ecosystem, we're able to demonstrate the value to clients, right? And changing the narrative from just looking at the cost per view to, for example, a cost per completed view. And there you can really play up the strength of premium video and OTT.
Thanks for that. So education all around, from the broadcasters, the OTT providers, the agencies, the clients is one of the main factors.
Yes, everyday job.
Understood. We're with you on that. Another question here is: do you see brands shifting their spends out of traditional TV and into OTT? Specific on this one to Indonesia, given the reach of TV in Indonesia, is it difficult to convince brands to move budget? So obviously we touched on some of the areas there, but on a direct TV comparison, do you see that kind of, being complementary, or there's potential money shifting with the some trends of movement, or are they still wide reaching?
Specifically to Indonesia, TV reach is still, the most, basically reaches the most of Indonesia, right? And while internet is catching up, we see it as more complementary. So we do what we call multi-screen planning, which combines TV with online video, right? And that's basically, looking at not necessarily trying to reach more people through online video, because again, the reach of TV is for the entire population of Indonesia, but it's about how can we actually reach people in a more efficient way by combining both TV and online video. And all our studies also show that combining these two deliver better brand, metrics, whether it's, increased brand awareness or brand consideration.
And on those metrics tools, is there challenges on that measurement of digital versus, TV? When you are trying to make those comparisons?
Well, from a planning perspective, I think we have the tools now that allow us to combine the reach curves, which is good. So we can actually look at, at what point TV reach or the cost per reach on TV becomes more expensive than a cost per reach on online video. I think the challenge now is measuring the actual delivery, because we don't have the combined panel of TV and digital in Indonesia. So this is, I think, the next homework for our market, and trying to develop that in the States, and in I guess in some parts of Europe, they do have the combined panel. So from planning to delivery, you can actually see and compare, right? So I think that's part of the homework that we need to do in this market.
Yeah, agreed. Another one that's coming up, well, I guess this is one we spoke about before. On a data perspective, when it comes to, I kind of touched on first-party data, from a publisher and brand's perspective, I guess as a publisher who's on the event today, they're asking what data is it that you would want to see from a publisher that would enable you to, better consider using them?
Yeah. I think, first of all, let's get demographic data right. And because OTT has login data, I think you have that ability to profile your audience much better, because getting that basic demographic data is critical. The next is understanding the affinity, because if you do have that content that allows you to segment your audience much better. Right? So what are they watching? What specific genres? And that could be a great proxy to learn more about the different audience segments that are on your platform. So from a planning point of view, that helps us identify the segments much better, but also from a creative point of view, like you were showing earlier, it can influence creativity as well, and messaging, which again, I would emphasize is as important. So we don't need to go too sophisticated. I think we'd start with those existing audience signals and work from there.
Okay, thanks. And I guess from your own, as much as you're willing to say, from your own first-party data, what's your, we're seeing a lot more of it in other markets of utilizing that, and I know, certain brands are doing that within your remit. How much of that is going to be a continued focus as well, and will that scale in its own right, or it's always going to be this blend with, third party and publisher that you think will work best?
Well, I mean, looking at the future, and there's a lot of conversation about the cookieless world, right? First party data is extremely important. And we are, also working with our clients very closely in terms of mapping that out as their data strategy, building their first party data. And depending on where the client is in that journey, if they do have their own first party data, the challenge is also matching and finding these with our publisher partners. So that's still, something we need to work on. And one of the homework, I think. So one is being able to build the first party data, which we have, but our ability to find them on OTT and different online video partners is still something that we all need to work on. Still homework.
Okay. Homework for it all.
I know there's a lot of homework coming out of this webinar. I'm sorry, but that's just what's the price to pay for developing and working on something as important as OTT.
Yeah, homework and education. So we got teachers and students. Another one here that's got a number of likes, so I'll read it directly out. Do you find that completion rate and viewability are both appropriate metrics to evaluate OTT performance and compared to other digital video format environments? Imagine the same conundrum as with linear TV, as content can be viewed without actually consumer attention, as it might be forced.
Right.
So I guess top line, do you see completion rate and viewability as the most appropriate metrics to evaluate OTT performance compared to other digital channels?
Well, I mean, it has to do with what ultimately brands want, right? And brands want to be able to reach their audience and also be able to know that the audience has actually viewed whatever asset they've developed, right? So it's almost hygiene at this point, which is why we make it kind of the baseline for any conversation we have with any online video partner. And in fact, that has been key to the success of premium video in our market, is being able to talk about those things, because that is the strength of premium video. The fact that people will be willing to watch more of it because it's good quality content. And, also our ads are going to be seen in a much better context, right? So I think those are important metrics that change the conversation from just looking at a view versus, something that is actually viewed completely and in frame as well.
I agree. I agree with all of that, obviously, from a brand perspective. I think the other thing they mentioned forced here, I think part of the data we showed that, when surveyed people are used to free to air and then they see the value exchange of content to ads. And, I mentioned even in the US, 70% of people pick ad light rather than making full payment, so that they know there's a relationship between the two and they're getting something out of it, so that there is that value exchange taking place. Well, we're pretty much up on time. I guess one last thing. What's the one wish or recommendation you'd make to the group here today in terms of how we can advance the OTT ecosystem?
Apart from all the things we already said we need to do. Again, I would just emphasize, I don't know who's on the call now, but I think let's not forget the importance of creative, right? And if we have OTT players in the room, I hope you do realize you are sitting on a gold mine in terms of understanding your audience, and the kind of signals you're getting in terms of what will be relevant to your audience will help brands a lot in terms of creating more relevant assets that feel more native to the platform. So we should also, while we spend a lot of time working on the supply, getting that more efficiently and delivering it in the best way to brands programmatically, let's not forget the importance of the impact of creative and leveraging your data to be able to understand the audience to deliver better messages, because ultimately that is what will help brands succeed today.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a great finish on understanding the content the audience to best lead the creative. So with that, Crisela, thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar and quick dive in. Appreciate chatting with you, appreciate your time. And with that, Laura, I invite you back to close us out.
Thank you both so much. There was so much useful information. Crisela, thank you for the homework. That was a highlight.
I'm be invited to this webinar again for all the homework.
Sure. It was really helpful. And thank you. I really, really do appreciate both of you being so candid. So much useful information. Gavin, if you could possibly move the slide on, just want to let the audience know that the next webinar in our series is actually next Thursday, the 20th of August. And then we turn our attention to esports, which has obviously been gaining popularity for years, but more so during this pandemic. We've seen some data from Verizon Media, which is showing that 57% of new esports audiences that have joined during the pandemic period intend to continue to participate. But one of the challenges, I guess, that we face on our side of the industry is esports is much bigger than just playing games, and there's a whole ecosystem behind it that drives it. So this webinar seeks to demystify this complex ecosystem, as well as then providing insights around working with teams, personalities, what considerations, what opportunities, and what the future might hold. Gavin, Crisela, thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time today, sharing your experience, sharing your insights, and I do hope that you'll join us again on another one of our webinars. Thank you both, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.